So today we'll be talking. So today we'll be talking about the journey. The journey is about how we can move forward to from understanding our shadow selves in theory as a notion, and the journey is from that understanding, the notional understanding, to a real practical awareness and acceptance of those bits of our shadow self. But first, next slide, please. What is the shadow self? So this is a recap of what we did the last time. Does anybody want to pitch in over here? What is our shadow self? When is it born? All of these questions over here. Does anybody have perspectives they want to share before I start? And please remember, I always like to keep it interactive. So if you have something to say, just go ahead and say it. Okay, so our shadow self is that part of us which was created, which was actually repressed without our knowledge, which was daba diya gaya tha by ourselves, by our unconscious selves, in response to uh, uh, in response to our environments. So, for example, if there was some quality we had, some attribute we have, and that attribute, or expressing that attribute, or manifesting that attribute, got us some degree of some kind of a response जो हमको pleasant नहीं लगा, and that sort of thing जब वो बार बार होता है, then we tend to repress those bits of us, repress those attributes, repress those qualities, and ultimately that quality is still there, but we don't even know it is there. So it is something like a shadow thingy. It's somewhere behind us. We can't really see it. You could keep turning around and try to see it, but you are not likely to be able to see it because it is repressed. It is definitely there. It is born during our early childhood as well as during some of our formative experiences. If you just give me one moment, I've got someone at the door here. Oh, no one. So during our formative experiences, and that's how it is born. Now we can ignore it. That's what most of us do. For most of our lives, we just keep ignoring these things. And the interesting thing is, it comes to our attention every so often. How? Because when we have certain qualities in our shadow self, for example, let's say we have a tendency to be, let's say, possessive, and we don't know we are possessive, but we are, but we don't know it. And if we don't know it, we cannot acknowledge it. We cannot acknowledge it, so we cannot accept it, and we cannot even do anything about it after that, or perhaps modify our behavioral contexts in some manner. जहाँ देखे ना वो कुछ नहीं कर सकते उसके बारे में. So let's say we possessive. So what we'll end up doing is accuse others of being possessive every so often. This is called projection. And this is how it does come to our attention, or it could come to our attention every so often. In fact, other people might tell us, you are calling me possessive. So you might hear things like that, and that those should be some sort of hints when people tell us these things, when we get this sort of feedback from our environment. So the consequences of ignoring it are basically our relationships would suffer, our leadership abilities would become somewhat impaired. We might begin facing creative blocks. We will have reduced quality of life. There might be increased base levels of stress, and anxiety might be higher than usual. Plus, we would have a very distorted view of reality, because reality is influenced by who we are to a certain extent. And when some parts of us are not known, so we don't really see reality the way we should be seeing it. The benefits of illuminating that shadow self, मतलब कि पास जाके लाइट चमका के हेलो कह के acknowledge करके accept करके उसको accept करने से ही we don't have to really change. Just the process of acceptance is going to do a lot of things. So not only we're going to improve our relationships and leadership abilities and increase our quality of life, जो भी वो सारी चीजें थी उस तरफ, but we'll also be increasing our vitality and well-being. That energetic nature जो हमारा होता है, जो self motivation कहते हैं, all those things, we'll start experiencing those, as well as experiencing much stabler emotions. Because ultimately, think about it this way: there's something around us, inside us, which we don't like. Inside, we know we don't like it. We would not like to be that way, or whatever that is. But it is around us all the time. And deep inside us, we know it is around us, but consciously we don't. So therefore, we will be, our base emotions, base levels of anxiety, stress, वो थोड़ा हट के ज़्यादा रहेगा. It's a bit of stress in the system, which we are almost unaware of. So before I move on to the next slide, any questions here before I actually move on to the journey? This was a recap. 3, 2, 1. Next, please. Okay, you'll have to give me taps to get the next one, please. So just a second. Let me just get to the slide. Okay, so when we talk about the illumination process, we're talking about a few aspects in that process. One of them would be to establish self-love. We need to understand who we are, love ourselves for who we are, accept ourselves. There's a whole process about this. We'll talk about that. But step number one, the base, the ground reality, the ground should be self-love, because without that base, without a base of self-love, it really isn't sustainable. Any of these changes, these processes we try to improve ourselves, improve the quality of our life, usko drive karne wala jo engine hai, that's going to be self-love. So we have to establish that and not just think that we love ourselves, actually love ourselves. We'll come to this after this. And then we begin the groundwork for self-awareness. So when we talk about self-awareness, we talk about understanding, acknowledging, accepting who we are, and beginning the groundwork for that, because most of us are not really self-aware. Most of us are not really open to feedback from our body, mind. Most of us do not really take feedback from other people as well. Renu, could you please check the microphones and switch off any that are unmuted? And all of that. Number three is to take detailed notes and to journal, because the thing is, this was a concept. I remember back in 2003 or something, somebody was telling me about an HR concept called the Black Book or something, which was about managers writing down what their team did well or what their team members did better. Write down incident based अपने आप लिखिए वापस, because at appraisal time otherwise we would only remember the पिछले एक हफ्ता, पिछला एक महीना, but the person might have done a whole lot better or a whole lot worse over the period of the entire year. So similarly, we need to take detailed notes and journal what we're doing, so that we have data. That is our data. That's the data based on which we will take our decisions, analyze ourselves, understand ourselves. And this data is not really for conscious analysis as much as it is for subconscious analysis. So we just need to keep writing it down. Next, after that, we're not really honest with ourselves, as honest as we could be. And so let's prepare to be really honest with ourselves कि मुझे दो चार चीजें सुनने को मिलेंगी, पता चलेंगी, which I might not like, which I most probably will not like, because that's the very reason that attribute is a shadow in the first place, because we didn't like it in some manner, interacting with it, whatever it is. So we need to be prepared to be absolutely honest with ourselves. And finally, we need to learn how to ground ourselves in the present. Why? Because unless we ground ourselves, unless our emotions reach a base level, any interpretations, perceptions, analysis we do is going to be tainted by the effect of those emotions. So we need to learn how to ground ourselves at that point in time. Next slide, please. So what is self-love? Can somebody please pipe up and tell me about self-love? Come on. You can do this. You can do this. Come on, I can see your cameras are on and you're attending here, so you might actually have some self-love going on. बोलिए ना.
खुद को forgive करना कोई गलती हो तो, rather than ये क्यों हुआ.
Sorry, who's saying that? I can't see your camera.
Swati.
Okay, Swati.
Yeah.
हाँ जी, Swati.
Self love is like loving yourself. कुछ भी हो जाए उसके, जैसे हम हमारे अपनों को माफ करते हैं, बाकी हो खुद से कोई गलती हो तो खुद को भी वैसे ही forgive करना, अपनी एक चीज appreciate करना.
Okay, fair enough. So self-love is about truly caring for all our different facets and dimensions. एक तरह से हम कह रहे हैं different facets and dimensions, but we might not even know which of those facets and dimensions in a manner of speaking, which is why we need greater self-awareness. But whatever we know about ourselves, कि जैसे भी हैं, we learn how to be truly care for that.
और
next,
if we love ourselves, then we'll take care of our health. We'll exercise regularly. नहीं exercise कर रहे regularly means we are not loving ourselves. That's where you are not taking regular care.
That's not entirely true, because it's very tempting to get into black and white. But if we are not able to exercise, or if we're not exercising, it could be a bunch of other things. For example, we might not know we have to exercise. It could be, let's say, ignorance at one end. On the other hand, we might know we need to. We might be trying very hard, but we might not be able to for a number of reasons. So we can't say that if we don't do this thing, then we don't do that. That's sort of black and white. No? We should avoid that. And because the question is, if you're not exercising, why are you not exercising? Let's ask questions. Why? And then we'll start understanding, the reason behind people's actions, because everybody takes actions for different reasons, and they don't have to act the way we act, right? So let's ask their reasons. So sincerely accepting who we are. Accepting doesn't mean that we don't want to change. लेकिन अगर कुछ चेंज करना है तो जो चेंज करना है उसको पता तो होना चाहिए और वो स्टेबल भी होना चाहिए. So let's accept who we are, because then that forms a basis, some base for change. And it's very different. Self-love is really, really different from pampering and indulging ourselves. Because a lot of the time we talk about self-love, especially the advertisements, which for all the consumer products and all that, self-love seems to be about pampering yourself. Self-love means go to the spa. Self-love means buy yourself a chocolate. Self-love seems to talk about, in the media and popular perception, it seems to talk about short-term happiness, medium-term, micro-term happiness. कि अभी खुश हो जाओ, that is self-love. But really, self-love is really about preparing to be happy for the rest of our lives. It's the base for that. And for that, we also need to start identifying the gaps. What are the gaps in our personality? What are the gaps in our skills? What are the gaps in our ability to be happy? Because a lot of the time हम अपने आप को happy होने नहीं देते, because हम कुछ चीजें accept नहीं करते हैं, or we might not be, there might be various things, various qualities we might have or we might not have that do not allow us to appreciate how lucky we might be. So many things. So वो gaps, we need to identify that and plan our personal growth. Because if, again, self-love is also about not just making ourselves happy, but also about helping us reach jahan tak we can, maximizing our potential, reaching our potential, being able to, if you've heard of the concept of self-actualization, being able to do that. So self-love is about planning for that as well. And finally, to prioritize our personal wellness and general positivity. Keep that for example, I have to, हम लोग कल आ रहे हैं. किस टाइम आ रहे हो आप? हम लोग 6 बजे आ रहे हैं. नहीं, 6 बजे मेरी क्लास है. आप लोग 7 बजे आइए, because 6 o'clock is my class on this. But most of the time what we all do is that we नहीं आप आ जाइए, क्लास वो बाद में कर देंगे, रिकॉर्डिंग देख लेंगे, फलाना फलाना. We tend to put down our sense of self. We tend to deprioritize things that would help us in favor of other people, and or because of what they might think. Let them think whatever they'd like to. They might even come and visit you in the hospital, but let's try not to reach there in the first place. Yeah. So prioritize what our personal wellness and general positivity. We'll talk about positivity after this. Next slide, please. So what is prioritizing positivity? We talk about prioritizing doing the right thing. Now, a lot of the time, we tend to prioritize temporary happiness over doing the right thing, because doing the right thing is not always easy. But doing the right thing almost always causes long-term positivity. So if we prioritize trying to do the right thing today, it helps us instead of prioritizing short-term happiness. Then we also need to contemplate longer-term outcomes. Now, for example, हम happiness की सोचते हैं, and the kind of happiness we might gain through various means. But then what is a long-term outcome of gaining happiness through that means? Because most of the long-term outcomes of quickly gained happiness, जो happiness हम बड़ी जल्दी से gain कर सकते हैं, they're not usually positive. For example, gossip. For example, eating the sweets and feeling happy because of things like that. So these things might make us very happy in the short term, in the medium term, but in the long term is going to come and bite us in the ass. It is going to, something or the other, some manner or the other. शायद एक gossip का ना हो, लेकिन दूसरी का होगा, पक्का से 100%. Okay, what goes around comes around, and we're Indians. Karma definitely applies to us. Okay. It was invented for us. So we have to contemplate the longer term outcomes of happiness, or happiness gained through less than positive means. Acha. Now, when we consider the outcomes of a positive response, a lot of the time when people say something to us, our first reaction is to lash out with something like, but you too, or what do you think, or some crap like that. And now let's consider at that point, just to consider that, okay, if I do this, this is going to be the outcome. But if I consider positive response, what could that response be, and what are going to be the long-term outcomes of that? Just a small thing. Now, ये पहले शायद 5-7 बार करना पड़ेगा, लेकिन बाद में it'll become almost second nature to us later on. Renu, could you check the microphones, please? बाद में it'll become second nature to us. To consider that, should I react in this way? Should I react in that way? And at which point, just the act of consideration changes it from a reaction to a response, because we are considering, or perhaps what you might call a considered response. Should I get irritated? What will getting irritated accomplish? Or should I not get irritated and just say this? And those of you who are members of the reading group, you remember that anger is a choice meant to accomplish a specific outcome. So it kind of ties into that as well. Acha. Now, when we consider assumptions, we typically tend to consider those assumptions that support our emotional state at that point. अब अगर assume करना ही है, that's not fair, right? If you're going to assume, you should consider all the assumptions, including the ones that do not support our the way we're thinking or the way we or what we really want to believe. That man cannot be good. Shakal dekhi uska, I mean, he cannot be a good guy. But the assumption here is he's not a good guy because I don't like his face, and somehow people whose faces I don't like are not good guys. Fair enough. But is it possible that people whose faces I don't like can be good guys? Yes, it is possible. I'm not saying probable also. I'm just saying possible. Yes, it is possible. Therefore, we've got to consider all the assumptions. Because if you remember, or a lot of you remember that when you assume, you make an ass of you and me. I'm sure all of you remember that. You come to 20-25 saal purana hai. So yes, we do that because a lot of the time the assumptions aren't really accurate. Assumptions do not necessarily mean fact. Assumptions based on my personal observations do not necessarily translate into applying to all the people around me. Assumptions about one particular type of person does not apply to all the members of that type. For example, if I'm looking at children, if I think something about children, about one child, or if 10 children behave in a certain manner, that doesn't mean all children behave that way. So similarly, we have to reconsider all our assumptions, re-examine them. And in fact, on the process of discovery of our shadow selves, it might be a wonderful idea to actually examine the basis of these assumptions. That I think people who wear, for example, I might not like people with French beards, and I don't like it. Fine, fair enough. That's fine. Why don't I like it? Let's re-examine that. Let's challenge the basis of our assumptions. Let's challenge the basis of our thought processes, and re-examine why don't I like Loki? क्या रीजन है? Is it because जब भी घर पे होते थे पूरी फैमिली ग्रोन करती थी इसलिए साथ साथ मैं भी ग्रोन करने लग गया? Is it simply because conditioning by association or something? Is it because for example तोरी के केस में लोग कहते हैं ये slimy लगता है? Is it because of sliminess? What's wrong with sliminess? You're okay with eating ice cream, but you're not okay with eating tori. They're both just as smooth or slimy. So what's the difference? So I'm talking about just examining the basis of our likes, of our dislikes, of our preferences, and all of that. And finally, we use the power of positive precedence. पॉजिटिव प्रेसिडेंस मीन्स दैट जो भी हमको पसंद नहीं है लेकिन उसका कोई फैक्ट नहीं है जो पॉइंट आउट करता है कि ये गलत है या ये सही है. There's no fact saying that this is not a good thing. So I'm saying let's try it once. A positive precedent would be, let's assume we're trying to give up coffee. लेकिन हर शाम को 6:30 बजे we want to have our coffee every day. We be having it और वो हमेशा लगता है कि कॉफी नहीं पीऊंगा या पीऊंगी तो सिर दर्द होने लग जाएगा. So let's try it once. Try once without coffee and see whether you get that headache. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. If you will, उसी समय maybe coffee standby पर रख लीजिए. Keep it ready, make it and keep it ready. Microwave में गर्म हो जाएगा. And headache शुरू होती पीने लग जाइए. Fine. लेकिन अगर headache नहीं हुआ, it becomes the positive precedent. कि एक दिन I was supposed to do something which I did not like, which I thought would lead to certain unwanted consequences, but it did not happen. Right? So in which case we can always, but it did not happen, so we can try it once more. चलो मैं कल try कर लेता हूँ फिर. And then once more, and slowly we build up these positive precedents, and then वो मन से वो भूत निकल जाता है कि ये होगा या वो होगा ये नहीं होगा, whatever it is, and we're able to do these things as a matter of course after that. Could you go to the next slide, please? So now we come to the part about enhancing our self-awareness. When we talk about enhancing self-awareness, we need to be aware of all the different things that happen inside us. When we talk about our body, we talk about mind, we talk about spirit. So how do we really increase our self-awareness? The first step would be to set an intent. We repeatedly affirm, tell ourselves of our desire to increase our self-love and awareness. That I need to be more self-aware. Every once in a while, maybe it's just something written on your computer on a post-it note or something. It's just the establishment of an intent. Because self-awareness is, I need to eat, I need to go to the loo, I need to drink water. These are things we don't even need to tell ourselves, because these are, बहुत सालों से, decades they've been conditioned inside us since we were children. But self-awareness is something I doubt whether literally anybody in this room or in our groups or most of our circles were ever told as children. That when you grow up or as you grow up, you need to be self-aware. I cannot imagine any parent telling their kid that. And as a result, we generally, we're not really self-aware. And what we see around us, it generally discourages us from following that path. So we need to affirm this repeatedly to ourselves. That I need to love myself, or I love myself, and I am being more self-aware. I am going to increase my self-awareness, or any way you want. But remember to keep it as simple as possible. because your mind knows more grammar than you do. And if you choose to make it some complex or profound सा statement, उसमें grammatical work कर दिया, which may can have different meanings, you're going to be affirming something entirely different to yourself every morning. So just keep it as simple as possible. Simple grammar, simple this, 1, 2, 3. Acha, number 2 is to start observing ourselves, both physically and mentally. And by mentally, I'm including both mind and spirit or brain and whatever, however you'd like to have that distinction. But observe yourself. For example, if I'm moving this way, if I'm getting up, if I'm putting my hand on the sofa to get up or putting my hand on the bed to get up, why am I doing that? Is it because I need the support? Is it because my legs are not strong enough? Is it because I do not want to use my legs? Is it because I'm in the habit of putting my hand here and getting up? And if I'm in the habit of putting up my hand and getting up, why am I in the habit? When did I put on that habit? Are you seeing the number of questions we can ask ourselves about something as simple as कि यहाँ हाथ रखा खड़े होने के लिए, छोटी सी बात. But it's a wonderful physical observation that this is what I do every time. Why do I do it? Let's drill down. Let's try to understand better why, what happens. Yeah. So that is that. And again, mentally also, why do I have these preferences? Why do I talk this way? Why do I look this way? Why am I not able to look into people's eyes when I'm talking? Or why do I always look into people's eyes to the extent of making them uncomfortable when I'm talking? It could be any number of things. So we need to question us, keep observing ourselves. This is what I do. This is what I do. And then maybe start asking questions. So we question all those decisions. That I chose to have a Fanta today instead of a Pepsi. Why did I have it at all? But let me put that thing aspect aside. But let's see, why did I choose a Fanta instead of a Pepsi? I normally have a Pepsi, but today I chose a Fanta. What was the reason behind it? I normally eat this, but today I chose that. Why did I do that? What was the basis of that? Is there something in my environment? Is there something in the way I'm feeling? Did I see somebody who reminded me of somebody who likes Fanta and therefore I'm doing this? What was the reason? So we question all those things and we gather data, gather lots and lots and lots of data from, because these questions honge na, questions se khub sara information aayega. So we'll be gathering a lot of data. Next point, please. So we'll be gathering data, and so what we normally do is एक दो piece data आ गए and वो शुरू हो गए, trying to analyze, and we will reach a conclusion based on one observation or two observations. That doesn't happen, and if it does happen, it's not going to be accurate. So just keep gathering data. There's no need to hurry to reach a conclusion. We've ignored our shadow self for 20, 30, 40 years. Another 6 months is not going to make a difference. Okay, so just start taking notes, and one day you'll be looking at those notes and suddenly something will jump out at you. But just take notes and gather lots of data instead of hurrying to reach a conclusion. Because normally we do not reach a conclusion, we jump to conclusion. जोर लगा के, enthusiasm के साथ. Let's not do that. Let's just sit back and let the data come in. And finally, take notes in a sustainable manner. So those notes are our data. लेकिन sustainable हमारे लिए क्या है? I keep talking about sustainability because it needs to be something we can carry on doing, keep on doing without any interruption. And for example, maybe I like writing 100 words about everything that happened to me in the day, every incident. I like writing 100 words, but can I write 100 words every time? Probably not. So then what I will do is, अच्छा लिखा नहीं जाना, मैं ना शाम को लिखता हूँ सारा का सारा. और शाम को पहुंचने के बाद कोई नहीं करता. You and I both know कि बाद में करने वाला काम, especially notes लेने वाला, none of us really do that. So it's not going to happen. And as a result, it's not sustainable and it's not going to happen. So therefore, we're not taking notes. So let me just understand myself a little better by saying that, yes, I can't write 100 words every time. Let me just write a quick thing, कि कहाँ पर हुआ, क्या हुआ, just a couple of, it happened this morning in the kitchen with this person, and just a few keywords. बस पता है कि मैं जल्दी जल्दी कर पाऊंगा. So I can just keep doing that. So we talk about taking these notes, gathering this data in a sustainable manner. Next slide, please. Now, when we talk about being honest with ourselves, most of us are not, because first point, we may not like some things about ourselves. And when we don't like some things about ourselves, depending on कि कब से वो चीजें शुरू हुई थी, we might find it really difficult to accept it, or even, just accept the presence of something like that being said. Sometimes just one little word acts like a big trigger for our anger and irritation. Then the second thing what we do is, based on who we want to be, we create a self-image that this is what I want to be, or this is what I think I am. For example, I'm a funny guy. And the funny guys, because their social media posts are all the funny guy ones. Their comments to serious questions are also funny guy this thing, because that's their self-image. They look upon themselves as funny. They might not be, but they sincerely believe they're funny, A, or B, they sincerely want to be seen as funny by other people. It can be one of these two things. So these are self images, and these can be challenged by our observations, feedback from others. You are not funny, and I don't like that. So that self image of being funny can be challenged by somebody else who's saying, said you're not really funny. So, or at least these jokes are not that funny. So maybe want to change your jokes. And I say, kya keh rahe ho yaar? Sab haste hain. I might know heart of hearts they were all being polite, but I don't like it. So I'll need to be careful to avoid being triggered by incidences of honesty feedback, even if it is coming from me to myself, because I'll be observing people. I'll be seeing whether their smiles are forced or not, whether their laughs and smiles are reaching their eyes or not. The indications, heart of heart, I know whether I'm funny or not. Can I accept it? And the reason why we have the self-image that we like is because sometimes the self-image supports our way of being, supports our sense of self. So maybe, for example, we're not very confident people. Maybe there are some things about us that prevents us from holding our head high and walking in any in any gathering. And sometimes we create these self images as little narratives, as little bits of fantasy that allow us to pretend to be someone whom we think is more likable, who we think can be more confident, and all those things. So there is an element of, let's say, survival also in the creation of these self images. A survival money ki mera sense of self kaisa hai, how am I feeling today, and all those things. There is an element of that also. So it might not be that easy कि किसी ने कुछ बोल दिया और sense of self side हटो, सुनो इनकी बात, ऐसे नहीं हो, कभी-कभी नहीं होता ऐसे. A lot of the time you've got to condition yourself, you've got to prepare yourself कि ये feedback आने वाला है, I might not like it, but it's good for me, and while I'm going to reach a much better place. So because a self-image is not only a matter of preference, but sometimes a compulsion and a need for us to walk through life, it might not be a very pleasant process, and you might need handholding. If you do, get somebody involved. Acha, as well as derived conclusions. When I say derived conclusions, what I mean is when we look at somebody and I tell you a joke and you say, hey, hey, and you smile, stop smiling immediately. So a 2-second smile might not mean a real response. That's a derived conclusion. Derived from the observation. The observation was a 2-second smile. The derived conclusion, it might not be genuine. It might be forced. That's a derived conclusion. And honesty, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean brutality or hurtfulness. Every time we think about honesty, I think of this context where people say something like, okay, you know what, let me be honest with you. वो ये वाला. And these are by some people who very pride themselves on their ability to be honest and candid. But most of the time, they're just offensive. And even for ourselves, we tend to carry around this thing with us, that honesty, that the truth hurts. It doesn't have to. The right phrase would be the truth can hurt, but it doesn't have to. So walking around with something in our head which says the truth hurts, it's almost like a foregone conclusion. Ki sach bolo to it has to hurt. That's what it sounds like, but it doesn't have to. So let's keep that in mind. And the truth does not have to be said in a brutally candid manner. You do not have to say, you look ugly in that dress. You do not have to say that. You can always say, would you like to, that dress looks much nicer. Would you like to that one? Because that one's color looks better on you. We can say things in a more positive manner. So when some of us who try to say things, or some us, or who we see others saying things in a brutal manner, in an offensive manner, it is not about us at all. It is their need to say that, or our need to be offensive at that point in time. It's not really about the truth itself. It's about how we want to tell the truth at that point. And finally, honesty is not a punishment. A lot of the time we inflict honesty upon others. Like I said, come, let me tell you something about you. It's almost like, ab dikhata hu bhai. I will show you about, main dikhata hu. It's almost a lot like that. And honesty is a reward. Honesty is really something which is going to help us grow. It's not a punishment. So let's stop treating it like one, or including giving it to others as a punishment. It's more of a revelation. So when we get feedback that this is what you can do to improve, or this is what you can do to improve your perception in other people's eyes in this context, I should be happy that I'm getting a chance to improve, and I've got at least one piece of feedback. Then what should I do? I won't take that one piece of feedback, because right now I've got two pieces of feedback. One from me, that I am funny. One from you, I am not funny. So best of three to le lo. So let's talk to one other person, maybe tell him the same joke, or ask the guy that, do you think I'm funny? Maybe the guy says no. So fine. So let's go on a data-based approach. If 25 people think we are absolutely not funny, but 100 people think we are, might as well go on being that way, right? because being funny is not a matter of for consumption by us, really. It's a matter of consumption by somebody else. So let's let the target audience decide. Yes. Okay. And finally, we need to encourage others to be honest with us, and we need to take it well. So we need to tell people, please give me feedback, and they will say, लेकिन पिछली बार तो नहीं, I will not throw that at you again, I promise. Please, please give me your feedback. We can always do that. So we might have had bad reactions in the past, strong reactions to feedback. So we don't have to always have that. And a lot of the time we don't plan it out as well. That when he gives me this feedback, and if the feedback is not something I like, this is what I will do. A lot of the time, this is what I will do is something which is implicit, which involves throwing something at that person, but we don't know that. Consciously, we think, हाँ ठीक है, feedback ले लूंगा. Lekin a lot of the time that implicit reaction is hard coded somewhere else, and since we have not explicitly said to ourselves that I will thank him for his feedback, then I will write it down, then I will read it, then I will think about it, and I will consider it before saying a hurtful word to him or to others or to myself or anything. So if we explicitly say this, explicitly prepare ourselves for taking feedback well. This is also part of self-love, by the way. Back to you, Swati. It's also part of self-love, preparing ourselves to not be hurt, preparing ourselves to walk forward in life with an improvement mindset. This is also part of self-love, telling ourselves that I will be calm and I will listen, and so on and so forth. So encouraging others to be honest. Finally, the next slide, please. We have to ground ourselves in the moment, because a problem that arises is that half the time जब कोई कुछ कहते हैं या कोई कुछ होता है या कुछ ऐसी negative incident होती है, कोई वारदात ऐसी होती है, then some emotions rise up inside us, and those emotions, the way they make us feel and all of that, but the way they impact our perceptions is what I'm interested in at this point. Now those emotions are going to ensure, for most of us, that the things we see, that the data that we are trying to interpret, or the data that we are that we have with us, is interpreted in a very different manner from what it actually means, because it's going to be interpreted with the veil of emotion and assumption and all those other things with it, which means it's not accurate. So we need to be able to enter a zero state, or enter at least a grounded base state of emotions, so that we can actually trust our emotional subsystems. So step number one towards actually beginning to ground ourselves is mindfulness. And I cannot go into details on mindfulness at this point. It's a huge subject by itself. But basically, mindfulness is watching events as they happen. Events could be emotional events. Emotional events mean gussa aaya, sadness aaya, happiness aaya, all those things. Physical events could be bhook lagi, breathe kar raha hu, things like that. So those are physical mindfulness. It could be environmental mindfulness. Environmental mindfulness could be visual. वो वहाँ दरवाजा खुला, वो वहाँ पेड़ हिला. Or it could be kinesthetic. वहाँ से हवा आई. How's my bottom feeling on a hard. Let's say I'm sitting on a hard bench, and so how's my bottom feeling? So maybe it's feeling hard, maybe it's all right. I don't know. Maybe it's paining. So that's the physics. That's this thing. That's environmental thing. It could be about sounds, what the wind is sounding like, which doors are closing, where is it. So just being mindful of anything and everything that happens as they happen within that given context. So maybe you're just going to sit down, and let's say you're at your kids, class extracurricular hota hai na, where the stage पर the kids come and do all sorts of activities and all that, and all the parents are sitting and taking cameras and photographs and all those things. So at that point, you're probably going to feel overwhelmed at some point, happy at some point, proud at some point. Now, I want you to then be mindful, walk into that auditorium or wherever you're going, and start thinking, maybe this is what I'm watching for. Or maybe just observe your emotional state at that point. When will I start feeling overwhelmed and proud? Or when does my happiness reach its peak? When do I get irritated, apart from that idiot who's standing up in the, right in the front of the stage and taking a photograph? Uske alawa, do I get irritated at any point in time? So things like that. So just observing things in a mindful manner. Number two is something called infinity, which I call infinity gestures. This is a contribution by Renu, as you can see there. Renu, who's sitting there. Renu Handa, the co-host, who's doing the slideshow. Infinity gestures are a form of neuromotor exercises, which I call infinity gestures because I'm also linking them with a certain degree of mindfulness. So infinity gestures are something like this: are gestures which never end. So I've got my thumb, I've got my forefinger right there. So I'm touching the two, touching one, two, three, four. It never ends. Yeah, I can keep doing that. Now, there's a mechanism of how this works, but it is also related to mindfulness and the way our cognition behaves. But doing these sort of gestures also helps. Now, this is one gesture. Another gesture could be drawing figures of eight. You can actually write it down, continuous running, looping figures of eight. You could do that, or you could do it in the air as I'm doing now. You could do it that way as well. And there are a bunch of others that also help. The number three is doodling and handicrafts. In doodling and handicrafts, once again, this is also a way of kinesthetic mindfulness because we're working with our hands. We are working with our fingers, and let's say we're drawing something. So when we're drawing something, let's say you're drawing a circle and you got your hand and you got your finger on the point right now. So when I move that my hand, I'm actually planning about maybe 1 second ahead, where I know that this line is going to curve around in this manner and go around in this manner. And I know what a perfect circle looks like, even if I can't draw it, but I know what it looks like. I know what it should be. Therefore, I'm not just going to do this. I'm going to actually very carefully try and draw it like that until it reaches the dot again on the other side, right? And for the duration of that drawing, I am watching that line. I am watching the tip of my finger. I'm observing the tremors, any trembling happening. I'm observing my joints, how they're feeling. Can I do the swing easily? Am I drawing with my fingers? Am I drawing with my wrist? Am I drawing with my elbow? Am I drawing with my hand? What am I drawing with? So I'll be very, very, very mindful of all these things at that time. And if I'm mindful at that time, I cannot be stressed, largely speaking. Similarly, with handicrafts, for example, you might want to look at, when I say handicrafts, it could be clay work, it could be needlework, it could be just, for example, rafu karna can be such a difficult and time consuming and immersive exercise. We could be talking about embroidery, cross stitches, whatever really. So all those things which we do with our hands, which requires us to do something, to think something, to perform something in a certain manner, in a certain organized manner, that would cause us to be mindful and therefore offset any effects of stress. And finally, we have something called diaphragmatic breathing. If you've attended my hypnotherapy sessions before, you'll know that I ask you to allow your stomach to expand when you're breathing. A lot of the time, when we are stressed, the stress response क्या कहते हैं, shallow breathing. And when we start breathing diaphragmatic breathing, which means we are expanding our tummies and contracting our tummies and allowing our stomachs to expand with each inward breath and stomach to depress with each outward breath. So this does a number of things. In fact, it lowers the heart rate, it lowers blood pressure, it lowers muscle tension, and it lowers our stress hormones when we do diaphragmatic breathing. And it increases the amount of oxygen we have in the blood. It increases the warmth we perceive in our hands and feet. It increases and improves our powers of concentration, and it also improves our immune system strength. And I'm simply talking about a way of breathing. It's called diaphragmatic breathing. And additionally, diaphragmatic breathing also activates what is called a relaxation response, which goes ahead and reverses our stress response. Now, stress, by the way, is given a very, very easy treat by most people, by most of us, because stress could be almost treated like it's a part of our lives. But really, we're only meant to handle stress for a few minutes at the most. Because our body floods with stress hormones, neurotransmitters go all over the place. Our body is ready to start fighting. Fight or flight system gets activated. A lot of things happen. Sugar gets prioritized in the system. A lot of things happen in this system. And we're not meant to exist like that for a very long time, just a few minutes at the most. But we exist like this for days, months, years sometimes, and imagine what that's doing to your body. Imagine how stressed your body is. Imagine how much damage is happening in your body when this is happening. And here's another interesting thing: when we think about the thing that causes us stress, and given the intensity of whatever our feelings are on the subject, we might experience that stress response all over again. Which means that it's not that just we are feeling कि यार tension हो गई है, ये बात नहीं है. वो जो सारा का सारा stress response था, सारा का सारा body readiness, all the hormones, everything is re-released and our body goes through that all over again, over and over again for long, long periods of time at times. And imagine how we're screwing up our body because of that. So diaphragmatic breathing is just a very simple way of incorporating a certain type of breathing that's going to inherently apne aap se hi, it will start reducing our stress. And finally, we have a meditative exploration of awareness. When I say meditative exploration of awareness, is that we are going to basically sit down and enter a meditative state and try to figure out, what am I doing, what am I feeling, where am I feeling what, and all of those things. Now, so that is the end of this session. We are going to do one more session next week, where we will be talking about a guided meditative exploration of self-awareness, which we cannot do today. We don't have the time for that. But the next time, this is a very, very interesting session, guys. You really must come for this one. This is a brand new one. It's never been done before. So if you're tired of my old ones, it's not happening. This is a brand new one. And in this one, we will basically be visiting an enchanted forest. And in that enchanted forest, we are going to become more aware of our physical bodies. We are going to be reacquainted with some of our emotions. And we will go further inside, where inside we will find a place where we will get acquainted and meet our shadow selves. So this is going to be about another half an hour, 45 minutes. So I hope you'll come for this session next time. Next slide, please. Okay, guys, this was the last slide. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I see most of us have actually stayed in here on what was likely not a very boring subject. So good for you. And thank you. And good for me. I mean, thank you. So any questions, guys? Renu, if you like, you could please switch off your screen sharing, please. And let me remove the spotlight from your video.
Hello.
Ji.
So Swati here. Sir, is it necessary to take, ask different people and form a data if you really like something? If you like to dance, it really makes you happy. But you are not a good dancer. Is it really necessary to take people's opinion in mind? If you really like something, if something is your good hobby, like you like dancing or you like singing, so is it necessary to ask 100 people? Are you liking my singing?
It depends on the consequences of those opinions for you. No? Now, if, for example, those opinions have no consequence whatsoever, how does it matter what they think?
Or why do they dominated and then
I agree. So what if they have no consequences for you? Because a lot of the time we tend to look at things in two extremes usually. Number one is कि लोग क्या सोचेंगे. Number two is बाढ़ में जाओ सारे के सारे. But वो बीच में भी तो होता है ना कि I mean, for example, if my kids let's say best friend's family is extremely conservative. So when I go to their house, I will try to avoid drinking too much and dancing on the dining table. Correct? Even though I really enjoy doing that, but I won't do it at their house. Right?
You are at your own space, on your own place.
Correct. So it is there. So I will respect their sensibilities, because it is important to me in some respect to respect their sensibilities. But in my own house, if they're in my house, and then if my kid tells me that, you know what, they're very conservative, so dad, please don't dance on the dining table today. So again, that day also I might not, because I've got some consequences. But otherwise, how does it matter what they think? It doesn't matter. It only matters that I'm trying not to offend them. Does it make any sense what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. We'll take care of our guests and vice versa.
We might take care of our guests, or we might take care. I mean, for example, a lot of the time I have refused to tie up my dog. I will not tie up my dog because you're scared of the dog. I've actually told people you're very free not to come.
Oh my God.
Because if you mean a lot to me, then I will tie up the dog. But if a random person is coming and saying, tie up your dog, I say, you stand outside and talk now. Why should I tie up my dog? I've known my dog longer than I've known you. Right? Okay. So it again depends on what that person means to us, what the consequences of the but if that guy is income tax officer, bhai sahab, aaiye kutta kaun sa kutta yaar gaya ye to.
But if he bites someone, then what?
Then we have a problem.
Yeah.
Then we have a problem, absolutely. But then again, so what I'm saying is, it's not black and white. You have to consider what your what the outcomes for you are. Not just like that. So if, for example, if my neighbor doesn't like something, and that's fine. They're very free not to like it. That is their job to express their preferences. It is my job to do what my preferences are. So they're doing their job, I'm doing my job. It's absolutely fine. Correct? Yes. Why should we dislike somebody or this thing for not liking something or that? That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I'm getting somebody's habit of using 300 words where 20 will do. Okay, guys, any other questions? Anything that was not clear? Any feedback for me? I promise to take it well.
Listening to your voice after a long time, Venkateshwari here. I
Hey,
finally had
Venkateshwari.
Saturday Kutti,
Long
so I logged
time.
in. Yeah, you
How have you
played a very
been?
crucial role in strengthening my inner self. So a
Oh.
big thank you to you. And whenever I get time and I'm off on a Saturday, I ensure I log in, which is very rare. And today I did.
Yeah, so nice to see you after a long time.
Yeah,
How's your new
thank you.
work going?
Yeah, very well, Sid. Yeah, thank you so much. You've and I'm so glad you're doing this session. I mean, I could just relive whatever you spoke to me the last 1 year, and thank you so much for what you've done to me.
Oh, that's very sweet of
I'm
you to say.
thriving, I feel. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. Thanks so much. Guys, anybody else? Any sorry, I mean questions, not compliments. Compliments also welcome. I mean, koi baat nahi.
Yeah.
Lekin questions are more. If no more questions, Asha, by the way, we're doing a double session today, huh? 5:30 today. We are doing a draw along where we'll be drawing. So I don't know if you know, but we've got a doodling group. And one of the ways in which we can reduce stress and ground ourselves and all that is through doodling. So we've got a group for doodling, and we'll be meeting in about half an hour, where we'll be drawing together and creating a certain pattern and seeing how that works out. So if you are interested, this is the same meeting ID. इसी meeting ID में बस फिर से click कर दीजिएगा, ये खुल जाएगा. ठीक है? So if you need any help during your shadow journeys, if you're looking for more clarifications, just give me a yell. Post on the community healers group if you have any questions. It's a very interesting journey, and I am proof of the number of good things that rise up inside you when you have acknowledged and you're able to work with your shadow self. Why I'm saying I am proof is because one notices suddenly a whole lot of things that you can do, a whole lot of ways in which you're empowered, a whole lot of observations you start seeing which you haven't seen before, a whole lot of experiences that you were having all the time but you never experienced in reality. So a lot of things can happen. I'm happy to share more details over a one-to-one call. So just if you need more motivation to start your shadow journey, give me a yell. Chalo, you take care, guys. See you in about half an hour. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, sir. Thank you. See you.